was an actual photograph that I hadn't photoshopped it. That place doesn't exist. And I was standing here.
Here we are at base camp, ready for the big push to Rangi, Mount Cook.
Behind us here is Mount Cook, which is New Zealand's highest mountain. It's where Sir Edmund Hillary trained to climb Mount Everest. It's a little less than half the height of Everest, so he basically had to climb Mount Cook twice, and he sort of had practice for Everest, basically.
Very, very beautiful, huge open spaces. Lovely wildflowers. I remember go along all the roads, like just all kind of colours.
We hit it at this time of year where these incredible variety of shades of purple lupins just, you know, springing up everywhere. Nearly everyone on the crew has said it was like doing a recce for an amazing road trip they're going to do in the future.
They always say don't leave home until you've seen the country. Now I've seen the country and I'm pretty blown away by it.
So, Strathtyre, central Otago, a pretty remote location. We wanted to use this location primarily because it's a chase through the rocks, wargs, after the dwarves. So I love the idea of doing a chase that was that spread out over a huge landscape.
This is glorious about this place, is you can do 360 degrees, and there's not a satellite dish in sight.
You know, when we all went to Queenstown, I'd never been there before, and it was just astonishing. I mean, a beautiful jewel, really at the kind of the bottom of the world.
Queenstown, a famous holiday place here, but we escape the crowds and go up the lake and into the mountains, and that's perhaps my favourite spot.
Earnshaw Burn was probably one of my favourite locations, a gorgeous alpine sort of valley surrounded by waterfalls.
The place was alive with these incredible cascades. We're very lucky to go to some extraordinary locations.
A lot of the world's impression of New Zealand is that landscape. You know, the rolling hills and the mountains and the fjords. It's got everything in it.
It's real, it's the real countryside. But at first you think, wow, what a good job they made. But it's not, it's the real thing.
This is the Middle-earth I would always have pictured.
Meanwhile, the backdrop is so beautiful, people will think it's CGI. It looks too perfect. You can use that as an advert for New Zealand if you want. I mean, succinct, snappy, all positive, and cut. Brilliant, trademarked.
It's a hard act to follow all of them, actually, but they did a pretty good job of explaining everything. But when I travel internationally, it always staggers me how many people I meet who make the connection between New Zealand and the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. In the eyes of those who saw our films, New Zealand became Middle-earth and Tolkien's fantasy became somewhere you can visit. Perhaps no one knows this better than the cast and crew of the films themselves. We spent months and months shooting on locations all over the country in places that sound and, of course, look like they were pulled straight from the pages of a fantasy novel. The Mavora Lakes, Mount Olympus, Bog Pine Paddock, and, of course, Paradise. While we did get a few complaints from the actors about the lack of good sushi in Pew Pew, or the lack of plumbing on Mount Doom, everyone embraced the experience of filming here, and they continue to speak incredibly fondly of the country, its people, and the breathtaking locations we worked in. As you've just seen in the featurette that accompanied the release of the first DVD, Elijah Wood, Andy Serkis, Sir Ian McKellen, and many more of our actors have become ambassadors for the country. A decade on from The Lord of the Rings, the films in which those actors became Frodo, Gollum, and Gandalf, we see fans arrive in New Zealand armed with a trilogy on their iPads and a GPS in hand. They hope to visit the exact spot where a particular scene was shot, and they can. The Lord of the Rings films seem to catch the imagination of so many, not just those die-hard Tolkien fans, but filmgoers everywhere have been captivated by the scenes set in New Zealand's fjords, Alps and forests, and they want to see them for themselves. It is true that we were caught somewhat by surprise in the interest the Lord of the Rings films generated in New Zealand. This time, though, as we brought The Hobbit to the screen, we hoped the interest would reignite. Tourism New Zealand had a vision, which we shared, to ensure excitement for the films would translate into even more interest in New Zealand and even more visitors. The result was the 100% Middle-earth campaign. Catherine has already talked about the success of the campaign to date. It's remarkable to hear the statistics as well. In December 2012, the month The Hobbit was released, Expedia reported an 84% increase of flight bookings to New Zealand from December the previous year. Visitors to the home of Bilbo Baggins are up 100% on the previous year also. Spurred on by the legions of fans visiting, Peter decided to rebuild the Hobbiton movie set in Matamata out of permanent materials. Visitors pass through the Alexander's family farm and emerge in a little slice of Middle-earth. The reaction to the experience has been overwhelmingly positive, and 80% of the visitors are international. 300,000 people annually are stopping into the Matamata Visitor Information Centre, where our set builders have created a Hobbit-style gatehouse. This number is up from 30,000 a decade ago. There is, of course, much more to explore in New Zealand than that now famous farm in Matamata. Travellers to New Zealand trek north to south, city to town, mountain to sea. The close proximity of one location to another is a boon to both filmmaker and traveller alike. Unlike a Hollywood theme park, there is no special soundtrack or special effect that accompany their visit. New Zealand is a real place, a place that visitors can embrace and explore for themselves, just as we've embraced and explored those landscapes in creating Middle-earth. Thanks.
It's a very hard act to follow, both of these people. Cheers. I've been asked many times why New Zealand is such a great film location. It's pretty easy to answer. I set out over 15 years ago and set up a stand at the the Film Locations Expo, held annually to promote New Zealand as a filming destination. I'd earlier been visited by NBC, the US TV channel, who wanted to make James Clavell's book Gaijin here. And after touring the country with one of their executives, he turned to me and said, "You just simply don't appreciate what you have here, the closeness of the locations and all the different looks that are available here. It's just breathtaking." The Japanese partners made the decision to shoot in Japan, and they never came here. But back in LA, as I wandered about the Locations Expo, this is 15, nearly 18 years ago, I saw all the different countries exhibiting, and each one was stunning. Montana, Switzerland, Hawaii, everywhere. But one thing struck me. We had all of those same looks, or similar, within our shores. So I feel that this is our competitive advantage. We don't have to travel far to get a myriad of different looks, which is a huge incentive, budget-wise, for any producer. When we shot The World's Fastest Indian in Invercargill in Utah, we said to the Invercargill Council at the end of it all how much the interest the locals had displayed in the beach racing. And we said it would be a great idea to set up an annual event for bikers to test their machines on the beach, as we had done whilst we were making the film. Well, someone took that advice and ran with it, and the Burt Munro Challenge was born. It's run every year at the end of November, and 6,000 bikies from all over the world congregate in Invercargill and create mayhem for 5 days. But the most interesting fact is that because of our film reigniting an interest in beach racing, it's listed in Time magazine's travel section as one of the 5 festive events you don't want to miss in 2013. It's right up there with the Eurovision Song Quest. And who would have thought that? But it's Time magazine, so they know. I'd shot a TV commercial for Germany for a milk product, and the German crew loved their Kiwi experience and went home happy. About 2 years later, the producer, Ossie von Richthofen, grandson of the Red Baron, World War I fighter ace, rang me and asked me if we had snow in New Zealand in November. I assured him that we did in our glaciers. And he arrived about 2 days later from South Africa, and we went to Queenstown, hopped on a chopper, took pictures, and he went back to South Africa, where they were preparing to film 10,000 BC for Warner Brothers with Roland Emmerich directing. Now, Roland did films like Day After Tomorrow, Independence Day, and has poured billions back to the studios in LA. They wanted to find a snowy pass the Mammoth Hunters cross when they pursue their sister's kidnapper. It was a simple 3-day shoot, and they would shoot it after they finished shooting in Africa about October of that same year. Ozzy went back to Africa, and then rang me about a week later and informed me that Roland was so impressed with the pictures that he wanted to come out himself before they started shooting in Africa and see New Zealand. So he landed with several executives. We went back to Queenstown. We got several choppers and went back to the glacier. Everyone loved it. On the way back, in the helicopter, Roland said to me, "What's that there?" and pointed down to the valley below me and asked if we could land there. And I knew who owned the farm, so we landed on it. And he got out and he went, and I thought, what's he doing? And he said, when I was writing the script for this film, he said, "That's exactly how I imagined this to be." He said, "That's exactly what I was imagining." So he said, "Can you take that chopper, go back to Queenstown, pick up the executives and bring them back to this spot? I'll stay here." So I left them on the side of the mountain, took the chopper, went back, got the executives from Queenstown, and he announced that they were going to shoot the film here in Wanaka, in the Wanaka region. That decision cost over $8 million to make the shift from Africa to New Zealand, and we gained about $26 million in foreign exchange. The South Africans were quite depressed about it, and I was told that I shouldn't holiday in Africa anytime soon. But Roland's experience in New Zealand was a magical one for him creatively, although a nightmare for the studio execs. And he talked about this thing that we cannot sell, and it's called New Zealand Ink, and it's all about the way we Kiwis, if we are treated fairly, then we'll go out of our way to create whatever is asked of us. So 450 Kiwis trudged 5,500 feet above snow level, day after day in atrocious conditions after our little German friend as he put together his film. And he loved it. And when you see the Empire State Building, you think of New York. The Opera House, you think of Sydney, and the gorgeous lakes, mountains, lakes and rivers and stunning landscapes define us as a country and make our 100% pure brand sing loud and proud. Films influence that brand by assisting to raise tourist expectation. Then we have to sustain that interest, and that's easy once they are here. New Zealand Ink, our wines, our food. How many times have I heard, "Oh my God, that's how tomatoes should taste," from American visitors. I've met with an executive from HBO in LA each year for an hour every year for 12 years. And last month he came here on a private visit. And I, along with Film Auckland, hosted him and his family. He got to sail on America's Cup yacht in our harbour. We choppered him to the black sand west coast beaches, and we came back through Waitakere bush to the glorious east coasts, white sand beaches and our beautiful bays and harbours. And then we dumped him at the vineyard in Waiheke, which is a tough call. And we made him come back on the ferry, back to his hotel, which is just over here. At dinner that night, he bought a whole lot of HBO product as a present for me, and he held up HBO's box set of The Pacific, which they made with Steven Spielberg, and that cost $200 million and it was made in Australia. Then he mentioned Game of Thrones, which is another $200 million, and it was made in Belfast. And then he talked about New Zealand and how impressed he'd been about it. So now we wait with bated breath and still work actively to get something down here from HBO. He again loved his Kiwi experience, so my point, I guess, that I try and make is that everyone that comes here loves it and wants to come back. We just have to get them here, and that's where film and tourism work together to keep our visual identity in front of the rest of the world. Thanks for your time. Cheers.